Most sports cars change because they have to. A new decade arrives. A new market appears. A new design language takes over. The old shape becomes outdated. The old layout becomes difficult to justify. And eventually, the name either disappears or becomes something completely different. But the Porsche 911 did something almost impossible. It kept the same basic idea, the same rear engine philosophy, the same unmistakable silhouette, the same round-eyed face, the same feeling that the car is not trying to be everything for everyone. And somehow, instead of becoming obsolete, it became stronger. Today on Timeless Treasures, we are looking at why the Porsche 911 never really changed and still won. Because the 911 is not just a sports car. It is proof that sometimes the most advanced decision is not to abandon a difficult idea. It is to refine it until the world finally understands why it mattered. The first reason the 911 survived is the simplest to see: the shape. From the earliest 911s of the 1960s to the modern versions built today, the silhouette is instantly recognizable. The rounded headlights, the sloping roofline, the compact cabin, the strong rear haunches, the body that seems to lean forward and backward at the same time, like a machine always ready to move. Most cars lose their identity after a few redesigns. The 911 protected its identity. That protection became one of Porsche's greatest assets. You do not need to read the badge to know what it is. You can see the profile for 1 second and recognize the idea. That matters more than people think. A timeless car is not always the one that changes the most. Sometimes it is the one that changes carefully enough to remain itself. Porsche understood that the 911 shape was not just styling, it was memory. It was brand language. It was an emotional contract with the people who loved the car. Change it too much and the magic disappears. Refine it carefully, and every generation adds weight to the legend. But the 911 did not only preserve a shape, it preserved a problem: the rear engine layout. Placing the engine behind the rear axle gave the 911 a character unlike almost anything else in the sports car world. It created traction advantages, especially under acceleration, but it also created handling challenges. Weight at the rear could make the car feel alive, responsive, and sometimes unforgiving. Many companies would have walked away from that layout. Porsche refused. Instead of replacing the idea, Porsche kept improving it. Suspension geometry, tire technology, weight distribution, aerodynamics, brakes, chassis tuning, and later electronic systems all help turn a difficult layout into a signature. That is where the 911 becomes interesting. Its weakness became part of its identity. The car demanded understanding. It asked the driver to respect weight transfer, throttle input, braking, and balance. It was not simply neutral and anonymous. It had a personality. And over time, Porsche learned how to keep that personality while making the car faster, safer, and more usable. That is the quiet genius of the 911. It did not win by becoming easier to explain. It won by making its unusual idea work better and better. Then there is the air-cooled era. For many enthusiasts, the air-cooled 911 is the emotional center of the story. The sound, the smell, the mechanical honesty, the fan, the rear grille, the compact engine bay, the way the car feels alive before it even moves. Air cooling was not just a technical detail. It became part of the car's soul. The older 911s felt direct because there was less between the driver and the machine. The steering, the pedals, the gearbox, the engine noise, the fin pillars, the compact proportions, everything made the driver feel connected to the mechanical event. Modern cars can be much faster, but speed is not the same as connection. That is why air-cooled 911s remain so desirable. They represent a period when the 911's identity was raw enough to feel handmade by motion itself. Not luxurious in the modern sense, not isolated, not softened into silence. They were machines that asked the driver to participate, and that participation created loyalty. Porsche also understood something many brands forget. Racing improves a sports car's mythology only when the road car still feels connected to the race car. The 911 became stronger because Porsche kept proving it under pressure. Track racing, rallying, endurance events, privateer competition. The 911 appeared in places where cars are not judged by marketing language, but by what survives. Competition forced improvement. More power, better brakes, stronger chassis, improved cooling, wider bodies, better tires, sharper aerodynamics, stronger engines, more stability. Racing gave the 911 credibility that brochures alone could never create. And more importantly, it gave the car an aura of earned performance. The 911 was not simply a beautiful object for weekend roads. It was a machine with a record, a machine that had been tested, developed, broken, repaired, and improved through the demands of competition. That matters for timeless treasures, because true automotive legends are not built only in showrooms. They are built under pressure. The 911 carried that pressure back into the road car. Another reason the 911 won is that Porsche chose evolution instead of reinvention. Many car companies panic when the market changes. They redesign everything. They chase trends. They erase visual memory in search of new attention. Porsche took another path. The 911 evolved generation by generation. Longer, wider, safer, more powerful, more refined, more technologically advanced, but still connected to the same original formula. The headlights changed, but the face remained recognizable. The body grew, but the silhouette survived. The interior modernized, but the driver focus stayed. The engine technology changed, but the rear identity remained. That kind of discipline is rare. It is much easier to create novelty than continuity. Continuity requires confidence. It requires a company to believe that the core idea is strong enough to survive modernization. It also requires restraint, because every generation of designers must resist the temptation to prove themselves by destroying what came before. The 911 is one of the greatest examples of disciplined evolution in automotive history. It did not stay frozen. It stayed faithful. The cabin tells the same story. Step into an older 911 and the message is clear. This is a driver's car. The 5-gauge cluster, the central tachometer, the low seating position, the steering wheel, the compact view forward, everything is organized around the person driving. There is no confusion about the car's purpose. The cabin is not trying to become a lounge. It is not trying to become a theater. It is not trying to distract the driver from the road. It is built around focus. That focus remained important even as the 911 became more modern. Yes, the interiors became more comfortable. Yes, technology entered the cabin. Yes, modern 911s are far more refined than the early cars. but the best versions still protect the feeling that the driver is sitting inside a machine designed for movement, not just luxury. That is why the 5 gauges matter. That is why the tachometer matters. That is why the driving position matters. These are not just details, they are rituals. And rituals create identity. The 911 also benefited from something very few cars achieve: generational trust. When a buyer looks at a 911, they are not only looking at the current model, they are looking at 60 years of continuity behind it. They are buying into a story that has been refined rather than restarted. That gives the car unusual authority. A new sports car might be faster. Another might be more dramatic. Another might offer more technology or more aggressive styling. But the 911 offers something different: a lineage. That lineage turns every generation into part of a larger conversation. Early short wheelbase cars, impact bumper models, turbocharged icons, air-cooled legends, water-cooled evolution, modern high-performance variants. Each one carries the same core question: how far can the original idea be taken? That is why the 911 still feels alive. It is not a retro object pretending to have history. It is history still being developed. This is also why the car has become such a powerful collector object. People do not only collect 911s because they are rare or beautiful. They collect them because each generation represents a different stage in the evolution of the same stubborn idea. That is very rare in the car world. Most models break their own continuity. The 911 deepened it. Of course, the 911 is not perfect. It never was. The early cars could be challenging. The rear engine layout required respect. Some generations were controversial. Some design changes upset purists. Some modern versions have become larger, heavier, and more complicated than the small original car. But perfection is not the point. The point is that Porsche kept the argument alive. A car does not remain relevant for decades by accident. It survives because the idea at its center continues to produce meaning. For the 911, that idea is simple but powerful. A sports car can evolve without abandoning its soul. That is why it still matters. In a world where so many cars are redesigned until they become anonymous, the 911 proves that identity can be a form of engineering. The silhouette, the layout, the cockpit, the sound, the racing history, the way it carries its own past into every new generation, all of these things work together. The 911 did not win because it refused all change. It won because it knew what not to change. That is the difference. It changed the materials. It changed the performance. It changed the technology. It changed the safety, the comfort, the speed, the grip, and the refinement. But it protected the idea. And because it protected the idea, every improvement felt like another chapter instead of a replacement. That is why the Porsche 911 never really changed, and still won. Not because it was stubborn in a foolish way, but because it was disciplined. Because Porsche understood that some designs are not meant to be reinvented every decade. Some are meant to be understood more deeply, generation after generation, until their weaknesses become character, their shape becomes memory, and their continuity becomes the ultimate proof of greatness. If the 911's stubborn evolution still speaks to you, subscribe to Timeless Treasures and tell me which generation you think represents the purest Porsche 911.